The very first topic I wanted to talk about was the United Methodist set up on abortion. And so the very first thing that called my attention to this was an email that got sent out from the General Board of Church and Society. So I'm going to maximize it on my screen here. And it's a pretty short document. And I blanked out who it got sent to. I'm not on their mailing list. And I've already talked enough. So, Brian, why don't you read, starting there, the Supreme Court.
So it says the Supreme Court is back in session today, which underscores the challenges we face as a result of the reproductive rights rollback made in June. Women across the United States are now being forced to give birth, many without access to adequate health care due to the lack of Medicaid expansion. Among industrialized nations, the U.S. has the highest rate of people dying of pregnancy-related complications. Black women are disproportionately affected as they are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. These facilities are largely preventable with access to affordable, quality, and comprehensive health care. Will you join our efforts with a donation today to support our work? With your help, Church and Society has been advocating to expand access to affordable and equitable care by closing the Medicaid coverage gap, by partnering with ecumenical and interfaith partners, and calling United Methodist to action. We have sent letters to Congress, met with senators and representatives, written articles for national publication, and helped organize press conferences to demand justice for child bearers without insurance or access to affordable coverage. We lament for the 2 million people who remain without access to adequate health care in this nation. We lament for the mothers who have put their lives on the line to bring forth life in spaces that do not prioritize their survival.
Okay, well, I think that closes it out there. It's just a final plea for giving there. Now, the reason that I brought this up is I wondered how it struck you. You're familiar with the denominational stance on abortion and the different social stances that we've taken. My understanding is that the General Council conference that meets every 4 years for our denomination, they set the priorities for the GBCS and all of our general boards. I didn't recall this particular concern being something that we've commissioned them to do.
No, but it's definitely something that they have been advocating for a while. I've been in the United Methodist. I've been a United Methodist pastor for 31 years, and I can remember probably 10 or 15 years ago, somewhere in there, that I went to look on the General Board of Church and Society's website, and all I found were positions and lobbying for abortion, and not one statement, not one support for adoption. And I think that's what I went on to the website originally for, if I remember right, was looking for, what were the adoption resources we have, what were we doing as a church to promote that and support adoptive families. And
surely there's some statement that our denomination's made on adoption.
There is. It's right after the statement on abortion
within the social principles.
Yeah.
So go ahead and would you mind sharing that?
Sure.
Because I know you came prepared for that.
Yeah.
So go ahead and read the statement on abortion, and we'll pause for a second, and then the statement on adoption.
Yeah. I'm just going to read the first 3 paragraphs because the one on abortion is quite detailed. Once it gets past the first 3 paragraphs, it goes into different things
scenarios.
Different scenarios.
Okay.
But it's paragraph, or it's K in our social principles, paragraph 161. And of course, we're still using the 2016 Book of Discipline. We won't,
Okay.
But it says, abortion, the beginning of life and the ending of life, are the God-given boundaries of human existence. While individuals have always had some degree of control over when they would die, they now have the awesome power to determine when and even whether new individuals will be born. Our belief in the sanctity of unborn human life makes us reluctant to approve abortion. But we are equally bound to respect the sacredness of life and well-being of the mother and the unborn child. We recognize tragic conflicts of life with life that may justify abortion, and in such cases we support the legal option of abortion under proper medical procedures by certified medical providers. We support parental guardian, and other responsible adult notification and consent before abortions can be performed on girls who have not yet reached age of legal adulthood. We cannot affirm abortion as an acceptable means of birth control, and we unconditionally reject it as a means of gender selection or eugenics. And, what I see in that email and what I've seen from past lobbying from the General Board of Church and Society is how they define, the statement here, I think that's important, is that we recognize tragic conflicts of life with life that may justify abortion. But what do we mean by life? And what do we mean by tragic conflicts of life versus life? I kind of take the approach towards abortion of maybe like just war theory, and just war theory has these 7 principles that say, yes, taking of life, human life is a tragic thing, but here are 7 principles at which it might be justifiable. And, and we all have that belief or some kind of belief that says, if somebody is trying to take your life, then you have a justifiable reaction to maybe take theirs before they take yours. And so I can agree to the point about this conflict of life versus life. But I think where we get into differences is what do we mean by a conflict of life? And
one of the articles I sent out for consideration was a commentary by Holly. I don't know if that last name is pronounced Fugate, but I found this. It's as though she actually just read the social principles comments that you just did, and that she came out with a statement where she rejoices in the Dobbs decision. So that statement that we just read from GBCS calls it a removing of reproductive rights. Here, she sees this in a more nuanced light, where the Dobbs decision revoked a constitutional right to kill sacred human life, which our social principles affirm, that all unborn life is sacred. But then she acknowledges there are such things like ectopic pregnancies, where the mother's, if that pregnancy comes anywhere close to term, that mother will not survive, in which case the conservatives I follow say there really isn't any scenario where you have to kill unborn life, but you can prematurely deliver unborn life and let nature take its course, which is much more humane in my eyes. But I think what you were building up to was saying there are a number of women who say, my life will virtually end if you make me have this baby. My life as I know it will be over, and you cannot make me take this baby to term.
Well, and I think
my job will be over, my relations will be disrupted.
And what I've heard is it's a diminishing of the flourishing of life, that anything that diminishes life from flourishing, and by that they would mean, get in the way of a job, get in the way of whatever, then that is the conflict there. And I know in 2012 at General Conference there was we don't call them bills, but that's, there was legislation that didn't make it out of committee that wanted to put the word physical here, physical life.
Oh, really? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, and there was a hand vote done in committee, and my understanding was that this hand vote was fairly close, but the chair of the committee didn't call for an actual vote, just went by the show of hands, and based on their determination of the show of hands, they felt that
it didn't have enough support.
It didn't have enough support, and it didn't make it out of committee.
Well, and I think something that happened in 2016 was that GBCS had formally affiliated with RCRC, Reproductive Choice was one of the Religious Commission on Reproductive Choice, which advocated for abortion up to the moment of delivery. And the denomination as a whole said, no, cut them off. And then GBCS, through a hissy fit, issued a public statement saying this was unjust for, and then we also made a statement saying, you know what, GBCS, if you want to talk about church and society, talk about the persecuted church, talk about Christians being persecuted, and they haven't said anything about it, to my knowledge, since we commissioned them to do that. And then whenever the Dobbs decision came out, something we hadn't pointed attention to yet was they made a response, an official statement against the Supreme Court from making that decision, which is a decidedly far left-leaning position. And then a resource you pointed me to was Reverend Dwayne Anders wrote he took a posture of like a reasonable middle place where look at we value the life of the unborn and the life of the mother, but in the end he seems, in my opinion, to come down
Again,
entirely on that.
and it comes down to that. Anything that would seen as a diminishing of the status of the mother is a diminishing of life, and and that's the conflict of life versus life that justifies abortion. But you know what really bothers me about the email that I read is that it clearly does want to equate abortion with birth control. You know, and that in our statement in the social principle, again, you know, says we find it unacceptable as a means of birth control.
Yeah, that one of the conservative position is decidedly this is a human life. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know, there is no uncertainty. This is a human life, and also an approach to freedom where a liberal approach to freedom is I should not be constrained by anything. And so this baby will constrain me. It will limit my possibilities in life. A conservative approach says life is constraint, and there's freedom in navigating that constraint. But humans become very ugly creatures when we try to remove all boundaries, all constraints in our lives.
Well, and that brings me to the place that I don't know. It's an itch that I have a hard time scratching. And that is how our society has, on a whole, viewed this choice as either the mother has to abort the child or raise the child, and we do not talk about adoption. I mean, and I remember this is the reason why I went to look for Adoption Now resources. I was at the time volunteering some time at a local pregnancy crisis center.
Really?
And you know, and they were, you know, they'd show me the materials and what they do to convince the mother about, you know, not having an abortion.
Right.
They had their own sonogram.
Have you seen that we went and did a tour of an abortion or a
crisis
pregnancy center in Owasso?
Well, that was the one I was volunteering at.
Is it really? Oh my goodness. Okay, so we went and did a tour there.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
So I want to come back and talk about. Go ahead.
What I was surprised by it though was I asked them about, so when do you bring up adoption, or do you talk about adoption? And I was told they don't talk about adoption. It's either
really
abortion or raising the child yourself. And I was surprised that adoption wasn't even something that was mentioned, because it seems to me that seems to be if this pregnancy is going to be is a diminishing of the welfare of the mother in terms of economic or social status or something along those lines, wouldn't adoption be a better place to go? You know,